Okay, folks, another episode, the collection, part 14. And I'm going to start off with a pleasant book by a Swedish author, I believe. It's called The Summer Book by Tove Jansson. Jansson, however you want to pronounce it. Those damn Scandinavians always trying to mess us up. Oh, she's a Finn or whatever. Yeah, Finland. But she was part of the Swedish-speaking minority in Finland. Tove Jansson, The Summer Book. And this is a very pleasant book. It's about summer, sunlight, storms, and crystalline vignettes. Of course, I didn't make that up. The people who wrote this stupid blurb did. Oh, it's not stupid. And yes, she's the famous Tove Jansson who wrote the Moon Troll comic strip. And this is a very, very nice and pleasant book to read for all ages. For the adult, they can see some of the serious themes underlying everything, and it's very good. It's a magical book. It's a very good book. I recommend it. Now, here's another one that's an outstanding book that I'm so happy I have. Ubu Roi by Alfred Jarry. And this is an incredibly hilarious and frankly vulgar work. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. That's what you're reading. Yep. And it's a great book. And the word SHIT is highly, the word count, count the amount of times it's written in here in different fashions is at a high rate, and it's very funny. But a lot of the French humorists are very scatological. That goes all the way back to Rabelais and people like that. Very scatological people. Not all of them, but just some of the writers. All right, here's a great book by Henry James called The Wings of the Dove. It's a very nice book about Millie Teal, fabulously rich, young, and alone, a fairy tale princess and suffering from and she's suffering from a grave illness that is kind of subtextual. You suspect it, but it's never announced, which, it's that kind of a nuance that Henry James is very good at. And, the main themes are human greed and human tragedy. And this is part of this is where he was really hitting his stride when he wrote around the same time period, same time period he wrote The Ambassadors and The Golden Bull, which are spoken of as his best works. Really excellent work. A lot of good notes and a lot of good analysis in the introduction from Penguin. Okay, next up is a great volume. And if you're in high school and you like women, you should buy this. Charles Baudelaire, selected poems. A lot of poems about women and horrors. I Worship You Like Night's Pavilion. Just beautiful stuff. Charles hung around with a lot of ladies of the night, and he didn't look down upon them. And yet he was said to be he's said to be asexual. He was just like to be around them. But do I believe that? No. Okay, Rudyard Kipling's Kim, a classic for young adult readers, and an adult reader can enjoy this book too. Kipling tells excellent stories. He's an excellent storyteller. Look at this. I bought this used, of course, and it's marred with underlines, and come on, but that's okay. I dig that stuff. It doesn't hurt. I can still read the book, and I like it. Kipling's all right. He's not my cup of tea, but I have to respect his ability. He can write good books. Okay, here's a man who is criminally criminally underrated. Walter Pater, The Renaissance, and his other book, Marius the Epicurean, which I have, which is a novel, is excellent too. This book is outstanding. It is an outstanding overview of the Renaissance and some of the studies of it. And it goes from Italy to France, because France itself had its own, period during the Renaissance where it had great writings. And it talks about some of the 18th and 19th century scholars of the Renaissance, like Winckelmann. And good stuff. Triboulet, Giorgione, Da Vinci, of course, Michelangelo, the poetry. And these are all excellent. Luca Dalla and then Botticelli, and Mirandola. You can't talk about that without mentioning Pico. It's a great overview of the Renaissance, and it's a short book, but it's densely packed with information and great criticism. Criticism, not in the sense of critically, just assessing its value and stuff. Okay, this is a really excellent novel by Émile Zola called Therese Raquin, and it's a very good book. It's about a pretty bad marriage and murder, and it's one of his earlier novels, and I think this is the one that really took him over. And it's a very, much like most of his work, some dark themes in it. That's all I'm going to say. Good stuff, though. I like Zola, of course. All right, this is the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. And this is a note that a man wrote in really excellent cursive to somebody else. And I can't read it right now. And here's the work. And you got this. Oh, and there's a leaf in here. Wait, where's it at? Where's it at? Oh, there it is. I got it again. These are the days of our lives. There. Oh, there's a leaf in this book that I captured a long time ago. Oh, well. It's going to stay in there. Okay, next up. Henry James, The American Scene. I like the painting in the front. Penguin Edition. This is, he's been living in England, UK, United Kingdom for a long time. And he goes back to visit the United States, and he goes all the way from New England down to Florida and other places, visits Niagara. And some of his observations about the American scene and in New York City especially, and about the Hudson River and Hudson River Valley and all that stuff. It's really neat. It's a great book. Highly recommend it. As I always say, highly recommend it. Right, next up, and I believe that's me, is Mass Cult and Mid Cult, Essays Against the American Grain by Dwight MacDonald. These are all excellent essays about journalism, the triumph of the facticity, which is, of course, always a sign of something terrible. And no, I'm not talking about the facticity that Heidegger talked about. I'm talking about, facts. There's a saying that I think I made up, but maybe somebody else has said it. Facts are fairy tales awaiting a moral. Because a fact standing on itself without context really means nothing. All right. A lot of, everything from music to the Bible to books to assessing writers, American writers, and mass cult and mid cult. Mid cult would be, middle brow. Mass cult would be popular culture and how they mix, intertwine, and differ in certain areas. There's nuances. Okay, here's a really beautiful edition. It's the Renaissance dramatist a series by Penguin. And this detail of a painting of George Chapman plays and poems, really great stuff. And Chapman wrote some pretty good poems, and the plays are all right. Bussy D'Amboise is pretty good. All Fools. He was not one of the best, but he was good. And that's all I'm going to say. Not bad stuff. I'm glad I have the volume. Okay, next up, and I am so glad I have this. Heinrich von Kleist, The Marquise of O and Other Stories. And I will tell you that this Penguin edition is excellent. Very well translated. The stories in here are just amazing. Michael Kohlhaas is one of the best, and also the title Marquise of O is just an outstanding book. Very deep. Goes into issues of a father doting on a daughter to the point of it being kind of creepy. And the earthquake in Chile, and Kleist was just awesome. When he wasn't writing plays, he was writing excellent short stories, and this volume is chock full of them. Okay, now, bottom row. Gotta get down with Immanuel Kant and his political writings. This is a Cambridge Text in the History of Political Thought edition. It's a series, and these are his political writings. The Metaphysics of Moral, Perpetual Peace, which is a really nice essay. Theory and Practice. You got What is Enlightenment, which is another famous essay by him. The Idea for a Universal History. And it's good stuff. It's interesting. I mean, Kant is kind of dry, but he's a thinker, and you can see the thought coming through in the work. Next up is Kant's Critique of Practical Reason. And again, it is exactly what it says it's to be, practical reason. Doctrine of Method of Pure Practical Reason. And it's really, it's not as Delphic as the title. It's very good. Good stuff. Kant is, don't fear Kant. Just as like you shouldn't fear Hegel. They're not indecipherable, and there are good translations, and they're legible. All right, next up, an excellent book by Hans Jonas called The Gnostic Religion. And again, this is an overview of some of the streams in the Gnostics, like Marcion and the Hymn of the Pearl, Simon Magus. A lot of these would be considered heretics, of course. The Gnostics were considered heretics. And this is good stuff. This is really neat stuff. Mani, the guy, Valentinian. Mani, of course, was the guy who is the basis of, and Hermes Trismegistus. Again, back to Mani, of course. Mani goes back to Manichaeism and good and evil and all that other stuff. And next up is a saga, Njal saga, or however you pronounce that. It's an Icelandic prose saga, and it's pretty good. Very interesting. A lot of violence, a lot of dialogue. Good stuff. Next up, The Philosophy of Enlightenment by Ernst Cassirer, a famous German thinker. And this is a really good book. He goes over the Enlightenment, talks about the conquest, problems of the aesthetics, law, state, and society, the conquest of the historical world, meaning, historiography, really taking an important leap during that period. Religion, psychology, and epistemology. These are all sections of how he delineates and discusses the Enlightenment and how it changed certain things in those areas of thinking. All right, next up is a modern is an American Library edition of Jack London's novels and social writings. Of course, it has Martin Eden, John Barleycorn essays, Iron Heel, The Road, The People of the Abyss. So, and it's got nearly 1,200 pages, and it's pretty good. I'm not a big fan of London, but I have to respect his work. It's important. It's made an impact. All right, next up is a complete works of and letters of Charles Lamb, known for the Tales from Shakespeare, Charles Lamb, and other works. And these essays are very good. They could be on many things. On inconveniences from being hanged, which is pretty funny. On the genesis and character of Hogarth. Hogarth was a great drawer and artist. Popular fallacies, confessions of a drunkard, and some criticism sonnets of who was that? I think it was Sir Philip Sidney. Yeah. Genteel style in writing, the sanity of Trebrinus, Ellistononiana, to the shade of Elliston, some of the old actors. It's all over the place, but it's really good stuff, really interesting stuff. Early 19th century to not mid 19th century, but early 19th century to almost mid 19th century. Good stuff. Okay, here is a classic horror novel, and it's called The Monk by Matthew Lewis. It's a Gothic novel, and it's an excellent novel. It's very good. It was, at the time it was released, it was savaged by critics for its blasphemy and obscenity. But it's a very, it's a page turner. A lot of good stuff in it. A lot of intrigue. I like it. All right, next up we're going to go over 3 Levy books. The first 3 volumes of the first 3 pieces of his awesome history of Rome, from its founding to the to expansion to the Philippic Wars and stuff like that, which I had above that I already discussed. Okay, the first one is the early history of Rome, the myth of Romulus and Remus and all that other stuff, and how it began. Appius Claudius, Coriolanus, of course. What's his face did a really great play on that. Really good stuff. Livy really knows how to write history. Okay, then in Rome and Italy, talking about Rome's expansion in Italy itself, and okay, so that was Rome and Italy. I like this little coin here. You can see Romulus and Remus suckling from the wolf, but it's kind of abstract how it's done almost, but it's not. Okay, then the third volume, The War with Hannibal, which is a really excellent volume. Of all the volumes, this is probably the best, because you get to see Rome basically nearly on its knees after Cannae and another battle. They were, they basically were under siege, and it looked like they were going to lose. And Lake Trasimene was the other one. That's what I remember. 2 catastrophes for the Roman legions, and they lost. And Hannibal looked like he was on a roll, and then it turned, and he was chased back to Africa, and then we had this Battle of Zama, which basically ended it all. This is good stuff. The War with Hannibal, Levy. This edition by Penguin is really well annotated. A lot of great notes. A lot of information outside of the work, and a great introduction. Okay, now I'm going to go into some upper column books that were from before. This is a great book by Anne Radcliffe, the great Gothic writer. The Mysteries of Udolpho, about an orphan loses her parents and has to move in with some terrible people, and the villainous Signor Montoni has designs upon his wife's fortune, blah, 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 blah. And they get imprisoned in the gloomy medieval castle, Udolpho. Very good stuff. A lot of suspense. Very entertaining. Page turner. All that. Next up is a second volume of a great two-part volume series of Søren Kierkegaard, a Danish writer. Either Or Part 2. Now, Either Or Part 1 and Part 2 are about the decision between the aesthetic or the ethical life. And basically, he attempts through these works to reconcile them. In Either Or 2, there's a lot of hints on, Volume 1 has the seducer's diary and all that other stuff, and then a lot of this is colored by his relationship with a woman called Regine, his love, and whether or not he would marry her. And in Either Or 2, he starts to stress that maybe marriage is the way to combine both the best part of it, the aesthetic life, and the ethical life. And it's like a combining of the two to make the perfect life. And that's my take on it. Kierkegaard is always great. He's a great writer. Concluding on Scientific Postscript, one of his most philosophical writings, is a great work. Also, The Sickness Unto Death, and the other famous one about the teleological suspension of the ethical, which I have. Fear and Trembling, that's the other one. And really, Kierkegaard is a really, really fun and thought-provoking read. Anytime you get a hold of his work, I would recommend it. I would start with things like Fear and Trembling and Sickness Unto Death, which are short works, and then move on to Either Or 1 and then Either Or 2. They're very fat books, but they're very entertaining. Also, his first work, which was his doctoral thesis, was a concept of irony, basically dealing with Socrates and stuff. It's an awesome book. Concept of Irony is a really wonderful book. A lot of people say he's a Hegelian. Really, he did not like Hegel, but he respected Hegel, but he didn't like some of the conclusions he reached from his usage of what the so-called dialectic and all that other stuff. And that's it for today, folks. Have a wonderful day and enjoy the holiday season.